Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Combating COVID-19 Scams. Thank you for joining. My name is Jonica Horton, and I'm the VP of Marketing at Sandia Area Federal Credit Union. Now I'd like to introduce you to our presenter. Rachel Lund is the VP of Compliance and Risk at Sandia Area. She is a nationally certified risk manager who uses her cybersecurity expertise to reduce risk at the credit union and train staff to help protect members from fraud. Rachel has been with Sandia Area for 15 years, and she is a graduate of the University of Arkansas. In her free time, Rachel loves to hike, bike, and swim with her family. She's also an avid reader.
Monica, I'm so glad you could all join us today. I hope this information will be relevant to you. Thanks so much for being here. I want to start with this overview of what I'll cover today, acknowledging that there are far more COVID-related scams than I have time to cover. This FTC scam bingo on the slide here is for real. It's on their website, and it gives some examples of the COVID-related fraud that's out there, but even they couldn't encompass all of it. There's really a lot going on right now related to the pandemic. So topics that I'll cover today, first under the area of cyber fraud, we'll talk about phishing, smishing, vishing, and online shopping. We'll also talk about medical scams and unemployment fraud, and hopefully have a few minutes for some question and answer. Cyber criminals tend to take advantage of any situation they can, and COVID-19 is no exception. Part of the reason this is such a fruitful time for cyber criminals is that people are looking for pandemic information. It's a new disease, we're all curious about it, so we're looking for more information. Some people also have more time on their hands right now. That's consumers as well as criminals. And we're also all getting a lot more corporate emails right now. Every company I've ever done business with wants me to know exactly what they're doing in terms of pandemic response. So I'm getting a lot of those emails, and the fraudulent ones are just going to blend in with those. And down at the bottom, one thing to remember is that criminals will prey on our emotions and our curiosity. And this pandemic is a time of lots of emotions and lots of curiosity.
So Rachel, we actually have a polling question, so I'll launch that right now. Oops. Oh, a little bit of technical difficulties here. There we go. The question is, have you been the target of a COVID-19 related scam? And you can answer yes, no, or I don't know. Rachel, while we're doing this question, could you comment more about criminals preying on our emotions?
Sure. So one of the things that criminals do is they try to pose as someone you know or someone that you care about. Maybe that's a colleague, your boss, a family member. They may also try to pose as someone that you trust. Like I got a text last week that looked like it was from Chase Bank. I knew it wasn't for real, of course, because I bank with the credit union. But you know, that's an organization that people would trust. Criminals can also create a false sense of urgency. They make you feel like you have to act now, and that's an emotional response. We also see a lot of people really struggling right now during the pandemic, which makes us eager to help. These criminals exploit our charitable feelings, and charity scams are some of the fastest growing scams during the pandemic.
Well, it looks like the polling questions are in, and it's good news. 74% of people attending this webinar replied that they have not been the target of a COVID-19 related scam.
That is good news. It's on the next slide, we'll see that those people are in the minority. So Google data has revealed a 350% surge in phishing websites during the coronavirus pandemic. That's huge. 22% of Americans have claimed to be a target of cyber fraud, and roughly 9 out of 10 new sites were malicious or attempting to generate sales of fake supplements. So these statistics show just how large the threat is during COVID-19 because of the conditions that the pandemic have brought about. We're going to talk about a category of cyber scams that all fall under the umbrella of social engineering. And social engineering is the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential information or personal information that can then be used for fraudulent purposes. And I like the saying, it's easier to hack a human than a business. And I think that's probably true, because even though some of us won't fall for it, there will always be a few who will, and that's what gives criminals access. I love this little Dilbert comic at the bottom, and it says, "Why phishing scams keep working." And Dilbert there is asked for his bank account number, and he says, "Nope, that's a scam." The next person also thinks it's a scam, but the clueless little guy over here on the right, he says, "Okie dokie."
That Dilbert's so funny. Sometimes so true.
It's true, and it really only takes that one who's willing to click. So the first and most common type of social engineering is phishing, and that's what we talked about on that Dilbert slide. Phishing is social engineering over email, where criminals pose as reputable companies or legitimate people in order to trick us into revealing personal information, such as our account numbers, passwords, credit card numbers, or really whatever they think they can get from us. The FBI, the WHO, the IRS, and the Secret Service have all issued warnings about COVID-19 related scams, and they all involve phishing. These scams range from fake charities to sites that claim to provide a coronavirus vaccine or other treatments. The fraudsters use these scams to harvest sensitive information, and like we said, credit card numbers and account numbers. Another goal of the cyber criminals is to load malware onto our devices. And malware is a catch-all word for any kind of malicious software that's designed to disrupt, damage, or take control of our devices and data. So you might have heard of ransomware, spyware, and of course viruses. Those are all different types of malware. Here are a few tips to protect yourself during phishing scams. The first one is to hover over links. So as your mouse hovers over the link, the actual web address will pop up to let you know where that link will take you. And it's always good to know where a link's going to take you before you click on it. And you can determine, does this link look legitimate? You know, if your email is from the CDC and that link is going to take you to a website that doesn't have anything to do with the CDC, you should definitely be suspicious. Pay attention to the email address. So the criminals can make the from field say it's from anybody that they want. They can make it look like it's from the CDC. They can make it look like it's from the state of New Mexico. But look at the actual email address it's coming from to make sure that that matches up with who it says it's from. Be suspicious of any emails that you weren't expecting. Be suspicious of anything that seems too good to be true, because it probably is. Don't trust legitimate looking emails. Sometimes they look legitimate because they've got a logo that looks legitimate, which can easily just be copied. Sometimes they have fine print in an email that can look very convincing, and we just shouldn't be convinced by that. Visit websites through a search engine, not through emails or ads. That way you know you're going to the actual site and not a spoofed site. Be cautious with attachments. So it's those links and attachments that the criminals get. That's how they can load that malware. And then keep your antivirus software updated. And over here on the right-hand side, probably the most important thing to remember is that legitimate organizations, including Sandia Area, will never ask you for sensitive information over email. That also includes the WHO, the CDC, and the state of New Mexico. So I have a couple of phishing emails here, examples. I can get my screen to advance. There we go. The first phishing example is an email that looks like it's from the CDC. And in that top red box there, you can see that it says cdc.gov or -gov.org. So that's meant to be very convincing. We would expect it to say cdc.gov. And so this is sort of spoofing that legitimate looking email address. The main body paragraph of the email contains some factual information, and that's to trick you into trusting it. They think if they provide you with some facts, they'll get you to trust them, and that maybe you'll click on that link, which they say is updated new cases around our city. So the next line also gives us kind of that false sense of urgency. You are immediately advised to go through the cases above. So they're making you feel like you have to do something now. The next phishing example is trying to convince me that someone I work with is COVID positive. And one of the big red flags in phishing emails is grammatical issues or typos. So if you read that top line where it says, one of our team member have been infected by the coronavirus. Obviously that should say team members, and then the word infected being split like that looks like a typo. So those are red flags that something is a little bit fishy. And then the next line where it says these guidelines on how to keep you safe it's sort of manipulative wording meant to convince us that we're not keeping safe if we don't open the attachment or click on the link. And wording like that is definitely suspicious. And this phishing example is one that shows how criminals try to trick us by forging the appearance of authority. So it looks like it's from the WHO. And that logo right there is very convincing. It's the actual WHO logo. And they use that to, again, convince us that they are the authority on COVID-19. This one also contains another grammatical and typo issue. You can see in the subject line, safety is spelled wrong. And then down there below that blue bar, it says symptoms, common symptoms include fever, and then cough, shortness of breath is sort of smushed together with a little typo there. So those should definitely be red flags. And then that blue bar that says safety measures is a link. And if you were to hover over that link, if you got this email in your inbox, the domain would not be the WHO. So that would be one sign to you that this is not a legitimate email. So the next type of social engineering closely related to phishing is called smishing. And smishing is a form of social engineering that exploits victims by using SMS or text messages. SMS just means short message service. That's what texting is. And I have a couple of examples here. The first one contains a malicious link, and it tries to manipulate our emotions by making us anxious that maybe we have the virus, or we're curious that someone, who is it that we came into contact with that tested positive. So that's a manipulative little wording there. The next example I have also contains a malicious link, and it exploits our need for masks, our desire to get them for free, and our knowledge that they're in short supply. They're basically saying that the Red Cross is going to be distributing them. So the most important thing to remember with smishing is don't click on any links in a text message. Those can load that malware onto your phone. And the last type of social engineering we'll talk about today is Vishing. And Vishing is social engineering over the phone. A few helpful tips. First, don't respond to calls or texts from unknown numbers. So I'm in the habit of just letting things go to my voicemail if I don't recognize the phone number, and I just delete texts if they're from someone that I don't know. Also, never share your personal information over the phone. So the one exception to this is if you've initiated the call and you've called a legitimate phone number. For example, if you call the credit union and you talk to someone in our call center, they're going to need to ask you some questions just to authenticate that you are who you say you are. But if you haven't initiated the phone call, if someone's calling you, definitely don't provide any of that personal information. Be especially cautious if a caller is pressuring you. Intimidation is a tactic that these criminals use. Don't trust caller ID. Phone numbers can very easily be spoofed to look like they're from whatever phone number the criminals want. Don't click on any links in a text message, like we said on the previous slide. And always check the legitimacy of a charity before you donate. Both the IRS and the FTC publish lists of registered charities, so you can go verify that before you donate. I have a few vishing examples here. The first one, the test kit phone scam, it just highlights the fact that COVID testing is such a hot topic right now. This one is bound to get people curious. They're promising to send you a free testing kit. The one in the middle there, the delivery scam, supply chain issues have been a recurring story during the pandemic. So this scam wants you to believe that you can bypass that problem. And spoiler alert, it really is too good to be true. The last one there on the right-hand side, student loan callback scam, says that they're waiving student loan interest because of COVID. And this is something that Congress has talked about and various lending organizations have talked about. So some people might be expecting something like this to come, and they wouldn't be surprised to get this phone call. But again, go to legitimate sources to verify that this is really happening. Don't just trust a random phone call you get. And don't be fooled by offers that are too good to be true.
Wow, phishing, smishing, and vishing, these all look so legitimate. Do you have any general tips on how to avoid all types of social engineering scams?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I would say is don't fall for intimidation or manipulation. Those are tactics, and if we can step back and say, oh, this person is trying to intimidate me, then we'll be able to look at it more objectively and say, maybe this isn't legitimate. The next thing is verify with trusted sources. Also, be suspicious of anything that you weren't expecting. Be suspicious of links or attachments, whether they're in emails or texts. And the most important thing is just don't provide your personal information. If you haven't initiated the communication or you don't know, you can't verify who it's coming from, just don't provide that information. So the next attack vector for cyber criminals is online shopping. And if you look on the right-hand side of the slide, 52% of US merchants expect their online sales to be higher due to the coronavirus. So that's a lot more opportunity for criminals to more easily blend in with legitimate transactions. At the bottom there, you can see this interesting statistic. At the beginning of January, there was a 7.5% growth rate of new accounts on food service sites. And at the end of March, this new account rate had skyrocketed to 36%. So these are sites like HelloFresh and Blue Apron, Grubhub, DoorDash, Uber Eats. So this pandemic has definitely created a situation where there's a lot more demand for those sorts of things, with sit-down restaurants being closed or limited. And on the left-hand side, you can see this other statistic that fraudulent digital transactions rose 5% from March 11th to April 28th, compared to March 1st through March 10th. So that's a 5% increase. And I think that's probably just going to continue to increase. While a lot of online scams are targeted at older people, those that involve online shopping are really targeting basically everyone right now. Here are some ways that you can protect yourself while shopping online. The first thing is only shop at trusted websites. Make sure that it's the actual website, not one that's sort of similar, but not exactly the right one. Use Google, use search engines to find those, and not through links. Make sure you're vetting any apps that you use. When you load an app to your phone, you can make sure that it's not a forged one. The Better Business Bureau has a website that tracks fake apps. So go to the Better Business Bureau website. Retail apps are the most likely to be spoofed. So when we're doing online shopping, that's the most vulnerable ones are the retail ones. And that's because we add our credit card information there. That's what criminals are looking for. The other thing to look at when you're vetting apps is to read the reviews. If it's a well-known app, a retail app, it should have more than 120 reviews on it. If it's a spoofed app, they probably don't have that many. So that's another thing to look for. The next thing is don't boredom shop and don't hoard. And use complex authentication, which basically means you should have strong, unhackable passwords. Some websites and some apps also have multi-layered authentication available. So that may take the form of like security questions that they ask when you log in. Some websites and apps might also have biometrics like your thumbprint, and multi-layered authentication is always going to be more secure. And the last thing there is don't store your credit card details in the apps, browsers, or websites. If you do store your credit card number, they're just easier for the criminals to steal. So take the extra time to enter it every time you shop at that site. And just a little reminder there, social distancing has changed how people shop. This slide is just for fun. It's a meme that a lot of my friends have shared on Instagram and Facebook. It seems like maybe boredom shopping is a problem during the pandemic. It says, at this point, I have ordered so much stuff, I don't even know what's happening anymore. If UPS shows up with a llama tomorrow, it is what it is.
I've seen this meme. It's so funny. Let's ask our attendees if their online shopping has increased during the pandemic. You can go ahead and vote. No, I still go to the store, or yes, I'm in the llama category. Rachel, how about you? What category, what about your shopping?
Oh, I would have to say my online shopping has probably increased. Maybe it's definitely increased. I'm probably in the llama category.
Same
What about
here.
you? Yeah.
I was just mentioning to someone that I think since March we've had more deliveries, more online shopping than we have in the last 10 years, it feels like. We're constantly running to recycling. So, all right, let's end our polling here. It looks like a lot of people are in this llama category. I'll share the results. We've got 61% and then 39 that still are going to the store quite frequently. Hope you're wearing your masks. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I hope if anybody actually gets a llama in the mail, they'll send us an email so we can see.
All right.
So one area where scammers are really exploiting the pandemic is with medical scams. We should beware of fraudulent tests, cures, vaccines, and services that people are claiming to have. There are lots of unregistered merchants out there who may have a suspicious online presence. And that suspicious online presence is going to look like maybe a web address that's similar to well-known companies, a limited internet presence, a location that's outside the USA. Maybe they're advertising the sale of pharmaceuticals without a prescription. And sometimes they have branding images that are slightly different from legitimate products. Also, you're going to see where prices are either deeply discounted or highly inflated. And then there will also be unusual payment requests. So that may take the form of a virtual currency like Bitcoin. They may ask you to wire money to high-risk jurisdictions, or they may ask you to pay with a prepaid card. So normally, if you're doing transactions online, you would just expect to pay with a credit card. So any sort of alternate payment request is suspicious. You can check the FDA website, that's fda.gov, for all approved medical tests and treatments for COVID-19. And just a news story that happened probably about 10 days ago, the EPA has ordered Amazon and eBay to stop selling bogus COVID-19 products. And what that tells me is that it was a big enough problem that the EPA had to get involved and, send that order out to Amazon and eBay. So this is definitely something to be on the lookout for. It's definitely a way that criminals are trying to exploit this pandemic. The next category of medical scams is non-delivery fraud for medical-related goods, where the customer pays for goods that are never received. So fraudsters will take advantage of pandemic supply chain strain. Basically, we know that there are things in short supply. We should be on the lookout for shady merchants. And, that might look like a too brief corporate history. Maybe that merchant lacks a physical address, or there are address discrepancies. Sometimes there are multiple company names or variations, or maybe the name doesn't match the business type. The merchant might be reluctant to provide their financial institution information for payments. That's also suspicious. And sometimes the merchant won't provide shipping or tracking information, or they just keep claiming that there's a shipping delay, which is an indication that probably you're never going to get what you ordered. And then the last thing here is that the merchant can't explain the source of their goods or how they obtained those sought after goods during the pandemic. So those are just things to be on the lookout for. And the last category of medical scams is related to hoarding and price gouging. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network and the Department of Justice have received numerous reports of suspected hoarding and price gouging related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The DOJ has established the Hoarding and Price Gouging Task Force. And this is more than just regular people who occasionally panic buy. It's individuals who purchase these things that are in short supply, and then they sell those things at inflated prices because they can. And I've listed some of those things here. It might be masks or disposable gloves alcohol, disinfectants, hand sanitizers, and toilet paper. And then again, the payment method will vary by scheme, but it can include the use of prepaid cards, money service businesses, wire transactions, or electronic funds transfers. And I just read a story recently. The FBI released details of an arrest that they made in Brooklyn, New York, of a man who was hoarding enough of certain supplies to outfit an entire hospital. And he was selling those supplies to doctors and nurses at a 700% markup. He charged one doctor $12,000 for 1,095 masks. And other products he had included sanitizer, disinfecting products, chemical cleaning supplies, and surgical supplies. And he hid those supplies in an auto repair shop in New Jersey.
He hid him in a repair shop in Jersey. Wow, that is just so sad. Just think about how it held up getting, I know doctors and nurses were buying supplies, but how it held up getting them to the right places and saving lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, why all those organizations are involved. FinCEN and DOJ and the FBI want to make sure that, you know, the right people are getting what they need. So the last area of COVID-related scams that I'd like to talk about is unemployment fraud. And there's a news story about a Nigerian cyber gang who has filed hundreds of fraudulent unemployment claims in many US states, and it's just a scam that's growing. In Washington state, which has been the hardest hit so far, fraudulent unemployment claims already exceed $650 million. This scam is thought to use basically consumer information that was stolen in previous merchant breaches, like the Equifax breach in 2017. In some cases, legitimate claimants are without their unemployment payments. People are waiting for their checks to come and they're not coming because the cyber gang has funneled them elsewhere. And the same Nigerian gang, excuse me, has also targeted the CARES Act economic impact payments. So it's something to look out for. And this isn't the only way that unemployment fraud is coming. This particular gang is a high profile one that's making the news, but there are other gangs out there, other criminals out there that are doing the same. And various state governments have had some success recovering the stolen funds, but it's a difficult one because once these criminals have their money outside the United States, it's difficult to even track, let alone to recover that money. So it's one of those things that, because we've, you know, come into this situation so quickly and maybe states didn't really have time to prepare, there are some vulnerabilities there that criminals are exploiting.
This has been great information, Rachel. We have some questions. And just to remind the attendees, you can ask questions in the Q&A feature on the taskbar. So the first question, Rachel, is how do I hover over links on my mobile device?
That's a great question. It's a totally different situation, isn't it, when you don't have a mouse and you can hover over it. So on your mobile device, whether that's your phone or your iPad, a quick touch or tap on the link will automatically open the link. But if you press and hold down your finger on a link, you'll get an options box that will pop up. So in my email on my phone, the options are open your browser, copy URL, and share link. In some phones and other devices, there's also an add to reading list option. So before those options at the top of the pop-ups is the full web address. And if your phone has a preview of the site, you can click on hide preview to see the full web address for the link. And again, it's just a great idea to look at those links before you click on them to make sure that they're going to take you where you think they're going to take you and to a website that looks legitimate.
Okay, that's really good information. It can be very difficult when you're, especially on your phone and sometimes multitasking, to just hit on a link and open it without really thinking about it. So it's such a great tip. Another question.
Good point too, that, you know, we get into the habit of just clicking on links. And maybe it's a factor of changing our habits. We just need to remember that these criminals do this, so you can develop the habit of just always looking at that link before we click on it.
Yes, good tip. So another question that came in, how can I report a scam?
That's a great question. So there are lots of ways that you can report a scam. The Department of Justice has a National Center for Disaster Fraud hotline and web form. So this one's going on right now because of the pandemic. So again, that's a fraud hotline, a phone number, and then also a web form. The Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, has a website where you can report a scam. And the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center is also available to report any online scams.
All right, here's another good one about emails and texts. I sometimes get the same emails or texts that look suspicious. Should I just unsubscribe to the emails or reply stop to the texts instead of deleting them?
That's another great question. It gets annoying, doesn't it, when you get the same emails over and over again or the same texts and you want to just make it stop. But criminals can use the unsubscribe link to load malware just like any other link in an email or a text. So clicking on the unsubscribe link is just as dangerous as clicking on other links in phishing emails. You're really better off just deleting them. As far as texts, it's also dangerous to reply to those texts, even if you're replying stop, because it confirms that your phone number is a valid number that's in use. Again, even on the texts, it's probably better to just delete those and not reply at all.
Okay, excellent. Good advice. So here's another question that came in. It's about contact tracing. I went to a restaurant and they asked my name and phone number to contact me if there was a reported case of COVID-19. Is that legit?
Ooh, that's another good question. Yes, I think most likely that is legit. And those restaurants are just doing what they can to try and work with the state to do that contact tracing. If you would normally give your phone number to a local restaurant for a reservation, for example, you can trust them not to use it in a malicious, irresponsible way. And I know, a lot of restaurants are doing this because they feel like, they want to have that good faith with the state. They can open and be responsible if, they help the state do that contact tracing.
Excellent. Well, I've got one more question for you. During this time when so many people are in need, how do we verify whether the charity that we want to donate to is legitimate?
That's a great question too. I think, again, there are a lot of great charities out there that are doing great work right now, and there's a huge need, isn't there? With the pandemic going on, a lot of charities need extra resources, and they're looking for that. And so again, this is one of the ways criminals can try to exploit our desire to be charitable. The IRS has a list on their website, if you search it, where they list registered charities. So I would be hesitant to donate to any charity that's not listed there. And also the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, also publishes a list of charities, legitimate charities. So I would definitely verify those before you make a donation.
Well, I just think it's wonderful that people are making donations. So we definitely believe in that at Sandia, being a community credit union, supporting local charities like the Storehouse, and we continue to do so. So if I don't see any other questions that are popping up, and if you do think of another one, you can always email us at marketing@sandia.org. I thank you for joining our webinar. We hope that you found this information to be helpful.